Good morning and welcome back to the channel. After a couple early mornings and several successful flights with no delays, I enjoyed a somewhat relaxing work trip to Denver, Colorado for the week. The scenery is a far cry from what we see here in central New York. The air is drier, the ground is a little bit more brown, and there's mountains in the distance. While I can't show what I do for work, I can show some of the interesting scenes that I saw while I was in Denver. There was time for hiking, sightseeing, and of course, the airport, flights back, and a safe landing back here in New York. Upon my return, I headed right to the farm to make sure everything was still standing. And fortunately, it was. That's about where the relaxation ended, though. I went to the farm the next day to cut down some trees. I had a row of about 4 trees that I wanted to cut down, and fortunately all of the trees were leaning perfectly inward toward the field. All I had to do was notch them, cut them, and they should just fall into the field like all the rest of the trees I've cut so far. It was a nice still day. There was no wind, not a cloud in the sky. The first tree was notched perfectly. I back cut it, and I could tell right when it was going to go down. I got my escape route set, backed up, and watched the tree fall. The second tree, much like the first tree, it was notched perfectly. I back cut it. As I was cutting through, I saw it starting to give way. I saw my escape route. I backed up. I let the tree fall. Everything went fine. The third tree is where things started to take a turn, a dangerous turn, a turn I didn't expect. I notched it perfectly just like the other trees. I back cut it and it started to fall inward toward the field. Something happened though, and I don't know what. I've never experienced this before. I've cut a lot of trees. As it was falling forward, I removed the saw, and the tree twisted and went the other way. It started coming toward me. Instinctively, I put my hand out to brace it, like what that was going to do, and I took off away from the tree. The way it was falling, you can't really see it from the video, it was falling backward toward the building and out toward the road. Now this tree was about 80 to 100 feet tall, straight up, though, like I said, leaning inward toward the field. At this height, if it fell toward the road, it would take down all the wires. My immediate fear was for anybody who may be walking down the road, or of course, any vehicles traveling down the road. At the farm, alone, without any supplies, there wasn't much I could do. I was going to either have to take a run to one of the big box stores to get some rope, or call one of my friends, Steve, who does this sort of for a living. So that's what I did. I called Steve. He's a tree expert. Steve came to the farm and he brought some equipment. He got a very long extendable pole and of course a lot of rope. So what we did is get the rope way up high in the tree, over a couple branches, wrapped it around itself, tied it off with a slip knot, and then we pulled the rope all the way to the middle of the field, and we looped another rope around a stump that I had previously cut down. The stump was about 3 feet tall. We were able to get a rope around the base of that stump with the block and pulleys, or block and tackle, and we fed the rope through the block and tackle, started pulling, and as soon as we started pulling it, the tree corrected itself and it leaned back inward toward the field and it dropped. The actual effort that we expended to drop the tree was about 5 seconds once we started pulling on the rope, though it did take about 10 minutes to get the rope and the pulleys rigged. This was a horrible situation. The entire situation was dangerous for myself, it was dangerous for Steve, it was dangerous for any people who were walking, it was dangerous for any cars that were going by, and of course for the utility lines that were running along the road. It just makes you realize that when you're doing this kind of stuff, you really have to stop and assess the situation before you make that final cut. Things are happening over your head that you may not realize while you're making that final cut. The day wasn't a total loss though. There were 3 large trees that were cut down, and while I was waiting for Steve to show up, I did go out by the road and I trimmed some limbs on some of the trees that are running along the road. Now in about 2 weeks, I'm going to have Steve, myself, and a few other friends come over, and we're going to do a full day of tree cutting. We're going to cut down all the remaining trees that are close to the road and in front of all the buildings. In a few weeks, the tree cutting will be done. Another thing to point out, I did notice that something happened to the front foundation in front of the barn underneath the doors. It seems to have eroded, or something happened that caused a partial cave-in of the remaining foundation wall. Well, that's it for this video. I have another full week of travel this week, heading to both of the Carolinas, with more coming in the next 2 weeks. But until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.